The latest One Piece chapter shows a scene where the God's Knights attack Dragon at God Valley, causing him to lose Shamrock and to only be able to rescue Shanks. But what if what happened here was actually the reverse? Shamrock has in the current arc said that he believes himself to be Shanks' older twin brother and Garling's firstborn son, yet he could have in fact lived his entire life in a lie, where the twin whom Dragon rescued at God Valley, the boy who was raised by Goldie Roger, and the man we've known since chapter 1, was in truth never Shanks, but the real Shamrock. This could however go much deeper than Shanks and Shamrock just having their names switched at God Valley. If Shanks was in fact born as Shamrock, this would make Shanks Garling's true firstborn son and heir, but much more importantly, this could explain the entire purpose of this whole twin storyline, where all of it centers on the Child of Destiny. This is not a new idea on my channel, but the reason why Garling decided to father Shanks and Shamrock in the first place was more than likely a world government conspiracy, where I believe that the government wanted to get their hands on the prophesied Child of Destiny and turn them into Imu's loyal follower. While the government however may believe that they succeeded, and that they now have this prophesied figure in Shamrock, they actually could have made a mistake, and the true Child of Destiny, and the one who was born as Figarland Shamrock, has always been Shanks. What the story has actually been hinting at for a while is that there was never even meant to be a child called Figarland Shanks in the first place. During this God Valley flashback, Garling has actually confirmed that he had no plans to sire twins, and he was surprised to learn that he now had 2 children instead of just 1. What is also noteworthy is the name Shamrock itself, as this was very likely a name Garling himself had come up with. After the God Valley incident, Garling seemingly raised Shamrock and allowed him to keep his name, which I do not think he would have done if this name came from his mother, whom Garling had literally murdered. The birth of these children was also clearly no accident. Garling apparently had plans for his kids from the very beginning, as in this latest chapter, he is even willing to deploy the God's Knights to get them back. Shamrock's later life hints that Garling wanted his sons to be important members of the Celestial Dragons, but this was likely just the tip of the iceberg for what Garling had planned for them. Even before they were born, I think Garling's true goal for his sons was for them to be a weapon the government could use in the final war. I do not actually believe that the discovery Garling made on God Valley 2 years before the native hunting competition was just the Davy clan. But his much bigger find was Shanks' mother and her lineage, which was an earth-shaking discovery even compared to him finding the descendants of Davy Jones. The story heavily points to there being something very special going on with Shanks' bloodline from his mother's side. In the original black and white manga, Shanks, Shamrock and their mother have different hair color than literally any other One Piece character. You can watch my prior video by clicking here, where I go over why these 3 could all be descended from Joy Boy himself. But it could however be that it isn't just Shanks' lineage that is important, but the thing that actually makes him the Child of Destiny is his birth. In One Piece, there are a few special characters whose births were told of in prophecies. Shirahoshi being born as ancient weapon Poseidon was not only foretold by Charlie, but it was an event the Sea Kings themselves had been waiting for a long time. After reading Odin's journal, Momonosuke also realized that he was born for some special purpose, where no matter what, he had to stay alive until this purpose was fulfilled. But naturally, the most important character in the story whose birth was prophesied is Luffy himself, whose coming as the second Joy Boy had been foretold since the Void Century. Even though all 3 of these characters already came from special lineages, what truly makes them special is their birth, and this could also very well be the case with Shanks and Shamrock. It could be that the Child of Destiny was always destined to be the firstborn child of this woman, where Garling himself had apparently only planned on fathering 1 child. Yet, because of what happened after Maffy attacked Dragon, no one present could no longer tell who the true firstborn son was, and the twins very well could have been swapped at this moment. There is another big hint that the baby born as Figarland Shamrock was always meant to be the Child of Destiny, and this has to do with Garling's actions after the God Valley incident. Garling at God Valley had only just met his sons, and could in no way tell them apart based on just appearance, yet he still decided to call the child he was left with as Shamrock. It could very well be that Garling in this moment simply chose to live in denial, where he knew that there was a 50-50 chance that this kid was neither his firstborn or the child of destiny, yet he still presented him to the government and Imu as such, knowing that no one could prove him wrong. If the child of destiny is prophesied to play a big role in the final war, it would very much be in character for Imu to want this figure as an asset for the government. The Elbaf arc has revealed that the world government for their entire existence has known about the coming of the final war, but that they are also banking on winning it by harnessing as many of these prophesied assets as possible. They spent decades and centuries looking for the Nika fruit, trying to recruit the giants to their side, and trying to awaken the power of the ancient weapons. As all of these are things prophesied to play a huge factor in the outcome of the coming war. But the Child of Destiny could also very well be one of these weapons Imu has tried to harness. This could also explain why the elders actually show respect to Shamrock of all people, where they don't even give the same treatment to Garling or most of their other subordinates. But where I think this idea truly gets interesting is that Shanks, the character we've been following since chapter 1, may have in fact at one point discovered the truth about his birth. The Roger pirates seemingly learned everything about these great figures who would shape the final war on Laugh-Tale. This is where they not only learned about the coming of the next Joy Boy, but also about other important figures in this conflict, like the giants Momonosuke and the Worst Generation. It is therefore very likely that Roger's crew also learned about this Child of Destiny and his future role. If they also connected the dots that this figure was literally Shanks, it is possible that this is the very thing Roger said to Shanks after returning from the final island, where he could have given Shanks a hint about his destiny. Even if this did not happen though, one incredibly noteworthy thing about Shanks is that he decided to not look for the One Piece after Roger's execution. From all of the information we have now gotten in the Elbaf arc, it seems like Shanks at this point instead decided to find out the truth about himself, as Shanks after Roger's death very shockingly got in contact with his celestial dragon family. Shanks himself describes this period of his life as the moment when his entire world turned upside down, which could very well mean that he did not only discover that he was a celestial dragon, but also the important destiny he was born to play in the future of this world. It also very much looks like Shanks did get the answer to the question of who he truly was, as Cabanet Elbaf, 10 years after Roger's death, openly refers to Shanks as the Child of Destiny. This might be the point where this video gets a bit too speculative, but if being the Child of Destiny truly means being the firstborn son of the woman Garling murdered, there is actually one known method in the story Shanks could have used to figure this out for 100% certainty. This method would be if Shanks had used the power of the Memo no Mi. The memory devil fruit seemingly takes stock of a person's entire life, meaning that it could in theory be used to recover memories lost to childhood amnesia. Pudding is only 16 years old in the current story, which could very well mean that this fruit in the past had a different user. If Shanks had come in contact with the prior user of the memory fruit, he could have for a fact seen his own memories and learned that it was him, not Shamrock, who was Garling's true firstborn son. This may be a theory on top of a theory, but I would like to point out that One Piece has already done something like this before, where the previous users of devil fruits we'd seen in the current story actually played a huge role in the Oden flashback. I will however also at this point in the video admit that I still have very little idea what this Child of Destiny even is. Even if my prior theory that Shanks, Shamrock and their mother are all descended from Joy Boy were to be true, Shanks being the singular Child of Destiny would mean that he is even more important than the rest of his family, where just like Momo, Shirahoshi and Luffy, Shanks' birth supersedes even his own lineage. I would honestly assume that the Child of Destiny is ultimately just that, a figure prophesied to play a huge role in the final war. I would like to make a whole other video about this, but my best guess is that the Void Century very likely had its own seer like Madame Charlie, who foresaw many of the things that would happen in the final saga. Like Charlie, I think the explanation for these characters is that they were born with unnaturally potent observation haki, which is something we've seen can happen all the way back since Skypiea. The running theme with all of these prophesied final figures is that while they're destined to be important, nobody actually knows in what way, where even the people of the Void Century did not know who will eventually find the One Piece, or even whom the giants will ally with. One thing I really like about the idea of Shamrock being a false Child of Destiny is that it could add a lot of depth to both his and Garling's characters. If the birth order really was the thing that decided whether Shanks or Shamrock was the child of destiny, Garling knowing that there was a chance the son he raised was a fake could mean that he always had a strained relationship with Shamrock. We also do know that even beyond any prophecies, birth order in itself is something very important in One Piece families, where Perospero for example thought that he was in line to inherit the entire Big Mom Pirates crew, just because he was the firstborn son. Garling also would have possibly had to live alone with this lie, as revealing that he screwed up this badly could likely have earned him Imu's wrath, so Garling may have had no choice but to keep it a secret. Shamrock may also be in for a massive wake-up call at some point during the final saga, if he learns what truly happened at God Valley, where Garling not only killed his mom, but everything from his name and entire purpose in life may be false. Even though this theory could be a stretch, I still think there has to be a bigger purpose to the story doing something as ballsy as introducing Shanks' twin brother, rather than it simply being a single gotcha moment that the man who spoke to the 5 elders at the reverie actually wasn't Shanks. Babies getting swapped at birth is a really interesting phenomenon that actually happens in real life, and the story could make both Shanks and Shamrock way better characters if something like this was utilized. We already know that the manga likes this kind of storytelling, where children getting mislabeled at a young age and it changing the course of their entire lives has already happened to even some of the main characters. In a way, this could reinforce a point One Piece has always made about what truly defines a person, where no matter the circumstances you are born with, lived experience ultimately trumps everything and is the biggest force in shaping the person you'll actually end up becoming. For the record, this chapter actually did make me legitimately confused why the Roger pirates ultimately ended up calling Shanks as Shanks. I had assumed that Shanks' mother had told Dragon their names, and that Dragon simply left a note with baby Shanks in the chest revealing his true name, or something like that. But after what we saw in this chapter, there is no way Dragon could have been able to tell which twin was which after Maffy's attack. I guess a simple explanation could be that Shanks and Shamrock just had some name tags on their clothing, which admittedly would debunk this video's entire opening theory. Otherwise, I think Dragon could have just taken his own 50-50 shot with a possible note in the chest, saying that this baby's name was Shanks. I don't know, maybe Dragon just personally preferred the name. This chapter also hints that Garling had no children before Shanks and Shamrock, as Maffy says that she's surprised at Garling of all people having kids. This does not however mean that Garling later in his life did not have more kids. I mentioned this in my latest chapter breakdown video too, but the idea that Bonnie is actually Garling's daughter and Shanks' half-sister is just way too convincing to me at this point. Garling being revealed as Ginny's husband would also mean that Shanks may have a bunch of other siblings than just Shamrock and potentially Bonnie, as Ginny was said to be this unnamed Celestial Dragon's 8th wife. If Shanks being revealed to have a secret Celestial Dragon father and brother wasn't a big enough twist for you, the story could top this by revealing that Garling was in fact a love machine, and that Shanks has as many brothers and sisters as Katakuri. This scene with Maffy also hints that Garling even 38 years ago held some authority over the God's Knights, where even though he wasn't the supreme commander yet, the other knights fear Garling and do what he says. I suppose this could mean that Garling was something like the captain of the order at this point, just like Shamrock is in the present story. Shanks interestingly wasn't the only character whose birth came into question in this chapter. For the first time ever, we saw Captain John in action, and it appears that he uses the exact same type of metal claw to fight as Kid does in the current story. Unlike with Kid in the post-time skip, this arm isn't a prosthetic, as we know John never lost either of his arms. John being the possible prior user of the magnet devil food does not necessarily mean that he is Kid's father, but it is also not exactly unlikely. There's nothing in the timeline that would be contradicted if John was revealed as Kid's dad. But what is even more convincing is that we know One Piece characters like to inherit the devil fruit powers of their dead family members, and that this is a big part of the culture around devil fruits. I am personally hoping that this is not actually the case though, and that John isn't Kid's father, as the twists of everybody being related to everybody is getting a bit ridiculous at this point. And I wish this twist was only reserved for situations where it actually makes the story more interesting. This page showing Whitebeard Kaido, Big Mom and Shakky teaming up may actually be a reference to something we learned in the Ace novel, where these four were said to be the most powerful pirates in the New World in recent history next to Roger and Shanks. I'm also pretty sure that these four are the only confirmed Rocks pirates who have been canonically referred to as Great Pirates, But I wouldn't be surprised if the other members of the crew must have also had this title, as even Marco was called a great pirate in one of the data books. The biggest moment of this chapter was most definitely Garp by his lonesome making 3 future emperors run away. While I still do not believe that any of the characters here, including Garp himself, are in their primes, this scene is still nuts on so many levels. Big Mom before this chapter had been one of the most fearless characters in all of One Piece, where even when surrounded by the entire Beast Pirates crew in the middle of their territory, Lin Lin didn't even flinch. Even something like falling headfirst into a magma pool just annoyed her, and there was no fear in her mind even in that moment. Yet Monkey D. Garp, the eternal wise admiral, is able to give Lin Lin the heebie-jeebies. I don't really know what else to say, other than that I'm really not sure what fans who say that Roronoa Zoro is the most badass character in this story are thinking. This scene could actually be a reference to something Big Mom said all the way back during her introduction at Fishman Island, where she over everything else referred to Luffy as Garp's grandson. It's not just Big Mom though, but Whitebeard also during his meeting with Shanks gave Garp respect by calling him one of the few old powerhouses who was still around. There's an argument that this scene doesn't necessarily say that much about Garp's power, as the Rocks pirates are all on this island just for Shakky and loot, but I don't think that's really a fair assessment. Big Mom's exact words are that fighting Garp would take too long. We also already saw that Whitebeard was even willing to engage the God's Knight just because they were in his way. So at least to me, Whitebeard, Kaido and Big Mom all thinking that they couldn't just run through Garp even if they teamed up speaks massively about Garp's own strength. This trio of pirates would honestly even give legends like Joy Boy a hard time. All 3 of these characters are also notably very proud about their strength. So I really see no other way of interpreting this than them legitimately thinking that Garp in a 1-on-3 battle would still be a huge challenge. Whitebeard during his pirating career apparently sent all his loot back to support his home island, but I'm starting to think that this was a lie. He more than likely sent it to Morgan's, to make the world believe the psyop that it was Whitebeard who was the world's strongest man, and he must have really paid top dollar, since even Garp himself started to buy the propaganda. This scene of Garp just muscling through Big Mom's fire attack is almost beat for beat what happened between Luffy and Kaido in Wano, where Luffy also just shrugged the fire off. While Luffy said that this was just guts, this chapter might be a hint to there being something deeper going on with the monkey family, where they maybe possibly have some sort of innate resistance to fire. I wouldn't go too far with this idea, but I do still think that the family has possible ties to the people who came from the moon. If you really want to go wild with speculation, this could be a hint to both Garp and Luffy having some lingering Lunarian genetics. While I wouldn't commit to it now, if we later see Dragon having his own moment with fire, I'm definitely making a whole video about this idea. One last thing about this scene is that Garp's line about Big Mom's attack not being hot enough to cook prime rib is hilarious. I really like that it's a rare nod to Garp being as obsessed with eating meat as Luffy, even though we mostly see him gorging on crackers in the manga. Live action Garp is however a different beast entirely, where I'm pretty sure he's on a polar bear level carnivore diet. This is a completely random side note, but the team behind the live action really know their stuff, where they even snuck in a lore-accurate reference to Garp's favorite food being curry in the show. Dragon being blasted by Maffy in this chapter may have made him look like a weakling to some readers, but to me it actually did the opposite. Dragon is just 17 at this point, where even Luffy at his age was still getting overpowered by wise admirals at Marineford. So I don't really think that Dragon being able to keep going after taking an attack from a God's Knight is in any way a bad look. I think it honestly just makes Dragon a more interesting character, where he clearly isn't one of these freaks of nature like Big Mom or Loki, but he's actually more similar to Luffy, where Dragon had to earn his strength through effort. I think this scene at the end between Rayleigh and Shakky was just adorable. It really makes them look like just 2 young fools in love, though I have to point out that Rayleigh at this point is already 40 years old. Shakky's whole stunt with going to Pirate Island was at the end of the day just something she did to make Rayleigh notice her, but neither of them could have imagined the situation would turn as dangerous as it did. I am however getting a bit of a premonition that something is going to happen to stop the Roger pirates from just leaving, and that it could have something to do with Roger's hidden personality. This goes all the way back to Garp's words in the pre-time skip, where he said that if you talked bad about Roger's friends, Roger would turn into a demon who'd stand his ground and fight no matter what. So I think we very likely could see Roger have his own ace moment on Guard Valley, where someone is going to disrespect or threaten his crew, and we may finally see this demon Garp was talking about. If it does happen, I'm hoping the manga won't pull any punches, because a very overlooked part of Roger's character is that given a situation, he can become a monster. We've in the last few flashbacks focused on Roger's warm side, but this is just one side to him, where Roger is also the man who butchered Squardo's crew, and even Oden's first reaction to Roger was to call him a wild beast. From checking the Japanese rules, the word Rayleigh used for the Underworld here was Meikai, but this is different from the Underworld referred to by a lot of characters in the story, like Brook, Usopp and Zoro, who use words like Chigoku or Yomi. Rayleigh's Meikai is clearly in reference to his title of Meiyo, or Dark King in English. But what is even more interesting is that Meikai is also literally the term used for Elbaf's Underworld. I am really not sure what the connection is here, other than that maybe Rayleigh visited Elbaf at some point before Guard Valley, but that seems like a pretty important visit for this flashback to have just glossed over. The strike Rayleigh does on Sommers also has him doing a pose that I think is super similar to the one Zoro does with his onigiri, but I don't think this reference goes any deeper than that, where it's likely just another nod to the Wings of the Pirate King dynamic the story is so in love with. Shakky's own fighting style is also incredibly similar to Hancock's, which to me pretty much confirms that this is some sort of Kucha martial art. But the crazy part was that it actually hurt Sommers. Unless Sommers wasn't yet immortal at this point, I think this must mean that Shakky is a Conqueror's Haki user. Kind of makes me feel bad for the God's Knights on this island, since the God Valley incident is pretty much the motherlode of Conqueror's users. So it must be quite a shift for them to go from having a relaxing time murdering civilians to facing all of these monsters. Sommers in this chapter also once again really tries his best to compete with Garling in the douchebag Olympics of this arc, where we pretty much got several pages dedicated to nothing but him running his mouth to Shakky. Sommers is also apparently pretty set on his demented views about love, where even Shakky's looks have no effect on him, which to me is just yet another hint that he will face off against Sanji after his flashback is over. The cover story did make me wonder if we're being set up for all of these characters who died in Wano at some point being brought back as zombies by their fellow countryman and hero of the downtrodden, Kosuke Moria. I don't think it's anything Moria wouldn't do, since he already did this to Ryuma, so hey, maybe he will have his own legion of zombie samurai in the final war. Granted, not all of these corpses like Pedro's are even accessible. I talked about it a lot in this video, but please click here to check out my video about Shanks' hair color, because I actually just got it back after it was struck down by Shueisha, and I'm pretty sure no one else on YouTube has addressed this point about the special coloring the manga gives Shanks' hair. Huge thanks to all channel members for letting me reap their bounty. Even some of my longtime viewers may not know this, but a lot of my channel's videos are only accessible to members. So maybe check the membership feature out if you're interested in watching this exclusive content. Even if you don't though, I still appreciate you a lot for watching this video to the end. Stay safe guys.